Camille, so I am really interested in reducing alcohol. I don't think I will ever take alcohol completely out of my life. I don't think I'll ever be 100% sober. But I definitely don't want to be drinking to the extent that I perhaps was earlier in my life when I was at med school, all that kind of stuff. I wasn't excessive, but still, like, you know, it was a lot more than I'd wanted to be. But there's this middle ground now, a term that I've heard you use, mindful drinking. And it's not quite sobriety, and it's not like drinking, you know, even at the weekends regularly. I wonder if you could walk us through what that terminology refers
absolutely.
to.
And I think what's interesting with the term mindful drinking is it can be different for each and every person. My definition or my balance as a mindful drinker would be different than yours, and my balance would evolve. You know, when I started 7 years ago, when I changed my drinking habits, I was probably way more on the side of moderation. I was still enjoying weekly alcoholic drink. I was still having regularly glasses of wine and things like this, when over time I actually reduced to the point that then for a few years I wasn't even drinking alcohol at all, and then start reintegrating a few things. But like, so it's really different. And I always say mindful drinking isn't about drinking alcohol or abstaining. It's about becoming aware of your drinking habits, because often we're not aware of it. We just drink by default, and we don't really realize, we don't track how much we drink, or we don't remember how much we've had throughout the week. And so it's about becoming aware of our drinking habits, changing our drinking habits for the better. So finding our balance that works for ourselves, knowing our limits, knowing what works, what doesn't work. And for some people that means sobriety. You know, for some people that means cutting out alcohol.
And so that's sobriety, just to confirm, that's 100% no alcohol whatsoever.
For some people, that's the balance that works for them best, you know, and for others, that means moderation. And again, in moderation, my balance might be a glass of wine twice a year, you know, and yours might be a glass of wine once a week, you know. So I think that it's really broad, but for me, it's more of a mindset, and it's more of an awareness point where you begin to become aware of how much you drink, when you drink, how often, with who, in which occasion, and you start implementing changes. So it's about drinking better with better ingredients, less alcohol, and finding that balance that works for you.
I really appreciate that, because I can draw a parallel across things like junk food and sugary foods and all the rest of it. For some people, the right answer is not to have it whatsoever, and they can be quite they can become quite stark and specific about exactly having nothing in their diet. That's what works for them. Some other people are able to moderate. They can have a day when they eat whatever they want, you know, a couple of times a month, and that's fine for them. And the rest of the time, they can eat well according to whatever works for them, for their health and well-being. And other people are sort of like, you know, they can do it a couple of times a week where they have junk food, and they can still sort of like, you know, navigate what is quite a complicated food landscape. I'm somebody who can't have junk food in the house. And like Rochelle will always, my wife will always like have some snacks in there. And if I know there's snacks in the fridge or there's snacks in the cupboard, I'm going to go for that. So for me, moderation is actually being quite strict in the household. If it's like snacks outside, I can deal with that because that's outside of my control. But it's about figuring out what your what keeps you on the straight and narrow, what keeps you moderated. And I think alcohol is something that falls into a similar sort of way of managing.
And it's so interesting because already like you put that bridge between the two, and for some people that wants to moderate, that might be not having alcohol at home and never having a drink by themselves at home, or even if they have friends, is having an alcohol-free house, but when they go out and they go to a restaurant where they really want to try the wine list, so they go to like, you know, I don't know, like a cocktail bar, and they really want to try one of their alcoholic cocktail, then that's when they imbibe and they try alcohol. So I think that it's, for me, the most empowering part of becoming a mindful drinker is actually taking the time to really notice, to understand when you drink, how often, how it starts impacting your life when you're out of balance, and then putting in place those tactics, those strategies that really support you to stay on that journey of, enjoying your evenings out, feeling good, having a clarity of mind, and not having to be impacted by alcohol. And I think that you made a really good point as well, as saying that we're not all equal when it comes to alcohol. For some people, there is more tendency to become addicted to it. And I think that's also a reality that we have to be aware of, is for some people, sobriety is the answer. Or for some other. And some people will say things like, but alcohol is like highly addicted. And absolutely, but so is sugar, and so is casein and cheese, in the milk. And so
I think it depends on the individual, and that's why I think there is a nice parallel there. Obviously, alcohol is very well recognized to be addictive, and for certain people, no alcohol is the correct answer. But some other people can enjoy even a glass of wine at home on their own, and moderate their drinking behavior across, let's say, the month, for example. Other people, drinking alone at home is a step towards failure, a step to that spiral where they end up drinking and the abusive behaviors, the self-detrimental behaviors. So in that respect, the mindful drinking movement, I think, provides space for people who don't want to go to the extreme of sobriety, which is completely irrelevant for certain people, but they do have that motivation to reduce alcohol for whatever reason it might be. It might be the excess calories, the energy intake, the sugariness, or that clarity of mind, the feeling that they don't need. I used to be that person who, if you go to the pub or you go out for dinner and someone's having wine, or like, let's have some wine. I used to be like, sure, I'll have some wine. Or yeah, sure, I'll get a pint or whatever. And what you just said there about being intuitive and being aware of just how much you were drinking, I definitely didn't fall into that category. I don't think I had a problem with alcohol. I don't think I've ever had one.
But you were aware of it,
but because
it was default, and you would just...
The default, exactly.
I think that's very, very often what I see is, people at the end of the day opening their fridge, having a glass of wine because they had a stressful day, or going to the bar and drinking alcohol because they assume that that's what you do in bars, when actually when you get out of this like autopilots, then you realize that you have so much space to curate and create and decide what works for yourself. And I think that, it's also important to really understand how the body works and how your body works. Like if we go back to that addictive aspect to alcohol, and we look at what the recommendations are from the NHS, and we say that it's 14 units of alcohol per week, to not go above that. And actually, if you go above that, and if you go around, like, depending obviously on like your age and your size and all of that, but for women around 18 units a week, and for men around 22 to 24 units a week, which is actually when we talk a bit more about units, it's not that much. That's when actually you create addiction, and you will experience slight symptoms of withdrawal from if you drink that much. And that, 18, that's like less than like 2 bottles of wine, which is quite a lot, but that's like, I don't know, that's 3 glasses of wine, large glasses of wine a week, and 3 pints of beer. You're around that 18 units. And so I think it's about becoming aware of what is alcohol, how does your body process it, and kind of having this like tactic and strategy that you can put in place. So when you go out, you would have, you start your evening with something that is alcohol-free, or you switch, you go from something alcoholic to something alcohol-free, or you make sure that you drink enough water, and you always have, like, if you have one alcoholic cocktail, you drink 1 glass of water. Like, you kind of like sandwich that in the middle.
Yeah, we're going to talk about strategies, I think, in the middle, because I'm really interested in that, and it's something that I've done intuitively just by trying to moderate drinking behavior and all the rest of it. I think addressing where people are listening to or watching this at, I think is really important. So in the context of the UK, do we have any sort of numbers on who is looking to be 100% sober versus those who still want to drink but want to reduce their drinking behavior, and others who are perhaps just not really fazed by the alcohol? They don't think it's something they care about, and that's fine.
So, and those numbers are fascinating to me. Like, the latest numbers that came out is 15% of the population, the adult population in the UK, is teetotal.
15.
15.
Wow.
Um,
That's actually quite a lot higher than I
That you
first.
said?
Yeah,
I thought it was, I guess I'm too into this movement. And I guess I'm like surrounded by so many people that have chosen to live this like alcohol-free lives now. Probably because I have this impact on people when they're like, oh, I'm changing my drinking
That's like
habit.
1 in 8 people. But
that's like 15%. And so that's one part. And I think what I found really interesting, because also the numbers have like grown so much, even in like the last year, is 74% of the adult population in the UK are actively trying to moderate their drinking.
74%.
74.
Wow.
And last year it was around 50%.
Wow.
So even in just like 1 year, we've grown so much. And I think that I think last year was more than half of the population in the UK were saying that they were stating that they wanted to change their relationship with alcohol, either by cutting out alcohol or reducing. So they wanted to become a mindful drinker.
Yeah.
When now we're saying that 74% of the population is actually actively trying to moderate.
What do you think is driving this interest in reducing alcohol? Is it an awareness of the impact on our mental well-being, an awareness on our physical health, things like obesity or cardiovascular health? Like, what are there any sort of like data that support the sort of motivations behind it?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that the list is like never ending. There's so many different reasons why people, and I think at the moment we kind of put everyone in the same basket. But if you're moderating because you're training for a marathon versus you're moderating because you're really, trying to like build your business and trying to like put a lot of energy into your career versus you're moderating because you have a young family or et cetera, like your what you will drink will be different, the way that you consume will be different. But we kind of like can put it in 3 different buckets. There's the physical wellness, that we will put all of this of like, and that can be people that want to improve their physical well-being. That can be people that are really into sports, or that, all of this will go into the physical wellness. Then there's the mental wellness, which I think that's also something that like we're talking more and more. And I think that's amazing that like mental health is more at the center of the conversation, but also that we're really realizing that alcohol has a huge impact on mental health. We see that like the numbers are really high on how much you are more inclined to experience challenges with your mental health if you consume too much alcohol or above the guideline of the recommendation of the NHS. And so I think that it's, and I have this on my website, I have this mental health check-in where it's something like, if you're going out, you're feeling good, you're going out, you want to celebrate, cool. Have something alcoholic if you feel like it, but remember, like, drink remembering that there is a tomorrow.
Yes.
And then and it kind of like goes down the list.
I like
it's
that.
Like,
drink remembering that there is tomorrow. Yeah,
and it goes to like, you feeling really like overwhelmed and you're tired and you blah, blah, blah. Well, probably like there's other things that you can do, because a lot of people will say, oh yeah, but I drink to relax. But actually, that's not a thing. It doesn't make you relax, or for a very fleeting moment, but actually after that, it more spirals down than anything. And so for me, I always say to people that I guide through this journey of becoming a mindful drinker, if you're drinking alcohol, make sure that you're drinking alcohol when you're in the right space, in the right like mindsets. If you're feeling overwhelmed, you're tired, like all of this, actually alcohol is going to make it worse, because we know that alcohol impacts negatively sleep pattern, that we fall asleep straight into a deep sleep, but we actually don't get our rapid eye movement and all of that. So for me, alcohol should be a celebration that is done mindfully when you feel at your best, rather than something that you use as a coping mechanism or a crutch or anything.
This was sort of like my personal experience during COVID, actually. Like when I suddenly went to working in A&E full time, they're doing extra shifts, and then being sort of pulled in lots of different directions because I still wanted to maintain the podcast and all that kind of stuff. I found myself with nowhere to go in the evenings and just spending time with my wife, having a lot more of the wine, the sort of like the deserved like shot of whiskey, the sort of the luxury items that I thought, well, we can't go out to a nice bar, we can't go out to a nice restaurant, so I'm going to enjoy like a really good quality liquor and that kind of stuff. And just as you were saying, you know, people drink to relax. That was my reasoning in there. And I also found that there wasn't really anywhere else to go in terms of the choice of drinks that I could actually enjoy at that time period. And I'm the kind of person that loves the sophisticated flavors, particularly when it's paired with like good food and all that kind of stuff. And that's always been my excuse for not going down the sort of sobriety route like 100%, because I would miss it. I'd miss that the beautiful flavors of a certain wine or the rosé, or like what we're drinking right now is like perfect. The incredible rosé. What is it called? The rosé pamplemousse.
The rosé pamplemousse. This is like a delicious, refreshing, sparkling wine. Grapefruit liqueur, all alcohol free. And to be fair, if I pour that for you at the end of a long day that you had, without telling you that it was alcohol free, you would have loved it.
I would have loved it, exactly. I would have completely loved it. And so that, I think a lot of people listening to this, they're like healthy foodies, right? They love their flavor. They're not just going to eat a kale salad with beans. They're going to want to enjoy spices and different cuisines and all that kind of stuff. That's what
I call the healthy hedonist.
Yeah, the healthy hedonist, exactly. So, you know, for folks listening to this who are new to this world, like, what are actually the options now that people can enjoy without, because my experience prior to this was like a mocktail, right? Which is, I know, is a word that you hate. Just a quick one. If you're enjoying this kind of content, you will love our free newsletter called Eat, Listen, Read. Every week, I send you a recipe that you'll absolutely love, something to listen to, something to read, sometimes something to watch, less than 3 minutes, and it will help you have a healthful, happier week. You can find that in the link down below.
Hate might be a big word, but I have high opinions on it.
Which is high sugar and not really, you know, contributing to good health, as we know. So, like, what is there now in this mindful drinking movement? Like, what are you seeing that's out there? I
mean, I feel like that even in that story that you just shared, there's so much to unpack. You know, going back to what you were saying of like having long days and feeling, you know, overstretched and overwhelmed at the time, which was really understandable, that you were turning into something that to make you feel good, you know, to have to treat yourself. And I think that, and probably maybe even without realizing, to also cope with the intensity of what you were going through, you know. So I think that like often alcohol is used in that way of like escaping.
Sure.
And if it's done with awareness, that's totally fine. If with understanding and with, you know, finding the balance and doing it in control and in moderation, then that's fine. But I think the challenge that I often see is, you know, we live in a society where we often feel really on the edge and trigger, and we're working so much, and we're not giving ourselves enough space and enough time to be able to replenish our body, our mind. And so then we use alcohol in the way that is actually, yes, making us feel good in the moment, but actually in the long run, I don't think the impact is always positive.
Yeah.
I also think that like, as a society, we think that like alcohol is a way to make the moment special.
Yeah.
But I actually disagree with that. I think we need to rewrite the narrative on that. What makes the moment special isn't the alcohol content, isn't the ethanol in the glass. What makes the moment special is that beautiful glass, that amazing flavor, these moments that we're sharing. That's what you remember. And if we go back to COVID, we had alcohol at home.
Yeah.
What we were missing was the connection, was the experience, was the going to our favorite places. It wasn't the alcohol itself that we were missing. So I think we need to rewrite the narrative. And as you were saying, like,
that reframing, I'm 100% going to use that. I think that's just such a good nugget to, instead of because I think of like, as you just mentioned that, like loads of moments in my life were flashing back to me. You know, when I qualified as a doctor, when I was living in Australia, working in ITU, and I remember these moments like, you know, popping champagne or like, you know, having a toast or that kind of stuff. And it's not necessarily the alcohol. It's just something like as a society, it's sort of like the culture that we've sort of built around that. But there are ways in which we can change that. Like what you just, you know, created for me in front of me with the garnish and the the ice and the sort of complexity of flavors, and like this feels like a moment for me, you know?
You know, I always say, keep the rituals, update the recipe.
Keep the rituals, update the recipe. I love
That's
that.
what you need to do. You know, like the rituals are...
Gosh, I gotta write these down.
That's we should make t-shirts. I think for me, the rituals are the magic of, you know, being alive. Like, I think food and drinks have an amazing and a magical way of bringing people together. But I generally don't think that the alcohol has to be part of the equation, or definitely not every single time.
Sure.
And to go back to your question about the category, I think that also is the reason why we see more and more people wanting to, you know, actively change their relationship with alcohol. Because, I mean, I'm very fortunate. I've been in the drink industry for 15 years plus now, and I was very much at the forefront of the mindful drinking movement and the no and low. I launched my company, La Maison Wellness, at the end of 2017. So, like, I've seen the birth of most non-alcoholic spirits. You know, there was one that was launched, Sidley, by a friend of mine, actually. But that was pretty much it. And of course, there was some other brands, but the movement wasn't fully there. So I got to really become an advocate for the category, for the movement. You know, my goal has been really to show the world that tasty doesn't have to be boozy, to create amazing recipes that taste as delicious and create this experience. And I got to, as part of what I do a lot of judging spirits awards, which is,
because prior to the no and low movement, you were fully fledged in the alcohol world, right?
So I worked as a bartender for many years in many different places, from France to Australia. Go to bartend in the world best bar all around the world. I worked for a brand called Saint-Germain, which is a French Eau de Fleur liqueur, who then got acquired by Bacardi. So I worked with Bacardi for almost a decade. So I was very much in that world of, you know, the best cocktails and the best cocktail bars, and it was great. But I really felt like that, because I had this like knowledge and this skills of making drinks, I wanted to transfer that into this category of no and low. And so part of what I do is also judging all those spirits awards, which basically it's us. When we started, the first one, in like, I think it was 2018, something like that. And it was 4 judges, and we had maybe like, I don't know, maybe like 20 brands, not even what I'm saying. Anyway, it was small. But now I'm part of maybe 5 different international competition. I get to sit, like I just did international wine and spirits, which was like 2 days. It was like, I don't even know how many judges we are now.
And these
like
are all
so many.
no and low?
That's just, well, they do spirits as well, but I judge for the no and low category.
Okay.
And now there's like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of like non-alcoholic spirit. There's like, I think it was like in 2023, there was 72 non-alcoholic spirits, non-alcoholic product outside the beer category, the beer and wine category that were launched. 72 new products that were launched just in 2023. So the category has expanded like so quickly. And it's exciting, because I remember in the early days of the no and low, I was like tasting. I remember, I think it was maybe 2020. I got this like tray of alcohol-free wine. So everything is blind tested. So you don't see the bottle, it comes in the glass, there's a number, you enter all your tasting notes, and then you score it, right? So I had this tray of like alcohol-free wine, and I had maybe like 20 glasses on it. And by the end of that flight, I genuinely felt sick. I was like, I felt nauseous, you know, because the quality of the wine was just not there. The technique wasn't there. Now, I mean, we scored so many silvers and so many golds. And actually, recently there was a wine from Austria that entered the classic wine spirit competition and got 98 points score without saying that it was alcohol-free.
Really?
Which is incredible. So we really
they didn't declare.
They just entered.
They just entered it. They didn't
they've
declare.
probably seen it, because you have to put
the ABV. Okay,
things,
fine,
but like,
fine.
It was scored like.
But that's pretty phenomenal.
Points, which
that
really shows that
I know a non-alcoholic beverage was able to pass that high against all the other like regular alcohol.
So I think that the category is now really, really exciting. And I will say it's probably the most exciting category in the drinks industry because everything is to be done. You know, there's like so many amazing products that needs to be created. We have to like improve the technology and how they're made. So it's really, really fascinating to look into it. But if I was kind of like breaking it down, you have sort of like what we call like the mimic. So that would be like your spirits that are created to mimic the alcoholic version of it. So that could be like an alcohol-free gin or an alcohol-free rum or an alcohol-free whiskey or an alcohol-free tequila. So they will take all this like flavor that you experience and create something that like remind of that experience and those flavor. And then you have this, what we call like the new world, which is completely different. And they are products that are trying to do something that is not to be pinpoint to like an alternative to. So
okay.
that
So
can
it's
be
completely
like
novel products.
completely
that
novel,
isn't,
a new experience, a new ritual.
Okay.
And that can be a product like Botivo, which I think
I love Botivo. Honestly,
obsessed.
you gave it to me, and I like whenever I see Botivo on a menu, I just order it straight away. It's great. Yeah,
absolutely. And so that's, you know, again, it's made with a vinegar base, so amazing way to extract flavor, or natural. There's like the process is very long to do it. The maceration takes time. They really care about what they're doing and what they make.
And that was made by a sommelier, wasn't it? Like
it was made by a bartender, someone in the industry who was like doing loads of events and realized that there was a need for alcohol-free. So we see more of those really crafted products coming into the market, and some are really like beautiful. And I kept on saying I can't wait for it to not be just about being alcohol-free. Like they are. I mean, Botivo, the talking point about it is not that it's alcohol-free, it's just that it's delicious.
It's delicious, exactly.
You can add a little bit in your alcoholic cocktail and in your margarita, in your gin and whatever you're making, you know, that will just add this beautiful flavor to it. So that's kind of like the new world. And into this, you could also put like the functional ingredients. So like the three spirits world, which I made with like amazing adaptogens and really trying to create an experience and a feeling for people. So you have like their social elixir, which is like, you know, with ashwagandha and supposed to help you kind of like take the edge off. And you have livener that have like guava leaf and supposed to be and like natural caffeine, which is like energizing and should keep you on the dance floor all night long. And you have the nightcap, which has like valerian root that helps you with sleep and all of that. And I find this category really exciting and really
so that's where I see a really interesting place for things like adaptogens, right? Because I think currently the use of adaptogens is pretty crude. It's like, okay, you take this supplement every single day, or you take this mushroom-based drink every single day, and then you get these calming relief and benefits. And look, for some people, that's great and it works well. But I think for a lot of people, it's just sort of unnecessary. And there's other ways in which you can improve whatever symptom that you're trying to treat using lifestyle and food techniques. But in a spirit or a non-alcoholic beverage or mindful cocktail, I completely see why it works in that respect. You know, like a livener or a nightcap or something like that. So you're using a drink not just for the celebratory moments, but actually in a functional way.
And there's a brand called Wildlife.
What's it called?
Wildlife Botanicals. I actually haven't seen them for a little while. I hope they're still around. But the non-alcoholic sparkling wine was added adaptogens, so like different botanical adaptogen, vitamins, and they're like known as like the bubbles with benefits. I really love that.
Bubbles
I just think that like that's very smart and just such a great way. And for me, when I started my journey with La Maison Wellness, that's why I call my cocktails mindful cocktails, and that's why I coined that term, because for me it's about using better ingredients and less sugar and less alcohol or no alcohol, and really like embracing all this like amazing ingredients that you can use to, even when making alcoholic cocktail, is how can you make sure that, I don't know, you're using coconut water that helps with like rehydrating the body, or making sure that you do long serves, so like again you really hydrate the body, or you're using like different tincture and different things that kind of counterbalance.
Yeah, because you were talking to me earlier about the diuretic effect of alcohol. Now, I've always recognized the fact that alcohol is a diuretic for obvious reasons, but I didn't realize just how much you have to rehydrate after drink. And you were telling me something about beer and about, like, you know, if you have
any alcohol actually, but like, I mean, we've all, maybe not all, but many of us have woken up one day very hungover and literally feeling like a prune or a raisin, you know, like you feel like that all the water has been like sucked out of your body. And it's because whatever amount of alcohol you drink, your body will lose in terms of water 4 times that amount of alcohol, that amount of liquid that you drink. So let's say that you had 3 glasses of wine or 3 pints, then you would lose 4 times that amount of liquid because the alcohol is a diuretic. So you're like, it's so dehydrating. And that's why I always say, first of all, when you go out, regardless if you're like, you know, not drinking alcohol or drinking alcohol, when you go out, I always say, when you get to the bar, my three tips are, first, exhale, take a breath. You know, people rush to the bar and you get there, and if you're like me, you're late, you know, because I tend to run late all the time. And then all your friends are sitting, they all have a drink, and you sit down and you're like, oh gosh, now I'm late. Now I have to read this menu that is very long and figure out what I want to drink. And that's when you kind of like go back into like default, or you're like, I would have whatever they're having, but that's actually not what you want. And so I always say, take a breath, exhale, then start with hydrating. Drink a glass of water, or even start with a glass of sparkling water, you know, and have like hydrate, because regardless, too often we find ourselves finishing our first glass, our first drink too quickly because we dehydrated. And so starting with water means that you have a moment to pause, you have a moment to look at the menu, you don't feel stressed, you don't have this like, you know, bar panic, I call it, when you feel like you need to order straight away. And then you can take the time.
I like that. So, like, because I think I've definitely experienced that for sure. Like this panic, or like this bar panic, as you coined it, where you're trying to catch up. And I think we have a culture, particularly in this country, where there is that sort of peer pressure. And I've always felt that. And I don't think I've had the sort of the conscious knowledge of it, or the effort to just be like, you know, calm down a bit and just exhale. Certainly when I was younger as well. So that's a great strategy. Yeah. Just exhaling and drinking.
Exhale, hydrate, start alcohol free. I always say start alcohol free, because again, that gives you the option of like, you have a drink, you feel good, you can start your conversation, you can see how you feel, you can see how long you want to stay, what's the evening like, and then you can decide, do I want to stay alcohol free for the evening, or do I want to do, there's actually a new term that came out called the zebra striping.
Zebra, what's it?
Striping, like the
like what you're wearing. Yeah.
Basically what I'm wearing.
I like
I'm a representation of that. That's incredible like tactic. And so you will start with something alcohol free, and then you move on to something alcoholic, then you move back to something alcohol free, and you alternate. And you realize that actually at the end of the evening, you feel so much better. I kept on saying, great nights are meant to be remembered. Like that idea of, you know, like having so much fun, because we have to drink alcohol to have fun, but then to go home or to wake up the day after and to remember half of the nights. Like, or like, I can't remember who it was, but I remember watching this interview of someone say, drinking too much alcohol in the evening means that you're bothering, you taking time from the day after. And I think that's like an amazing way to look at it. It's like, I don't want to take time, you know, from the day after. Like, I think this idea of like having to like suffer the day after in order to have a great night is, again, it's like false narrative, and we need to reframe that, because for me, the best evening that I have, and we you know, we had some together, is when we go out and we have delicious food and delicious drink, and you go home and you feel like you had meaningful like connection and conversation, and you remember the night, and you wake up the day after with a clear mind, and you just feel energized by it.
Okay, so those are great strategies. I'm definitely going to be zebra. What do you call it? Zebra striping.
Yeah,
is that what it is?
Zebra striping.
Zebra striping. And I guess now, blending into the first bit, of our conversation regarding the choice of non-alcohol options
So many
in restaurants.
options.
It's definitely getting better. It's
Yeah.
not the best. It's certainly out of London, I would say. Like I was actually out of London a couple of nights ago, and I couldn't find any. So if you do find yourself in that situation where the options are alcohol, of which there are plenty of different choices for you, water, sparkling water, how would you sort of like create a mindful drink for yourself, like by ordering off menu, for example?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, first of all, I say always ask for something alcohol-free, because the more we ask in venues, the more they're going to have to really understand. Like if you look at numbers, in the UK, there's 800 million pound that is left on the table from bars and restaurants not having a solid, like, non-alcoholic offer, so people are drinking water.
That's a great start.
So
800 million
that
on the
800
table.
million, I do think that like the UK hospitality industry need that money. So the more you ask, the more they're gonna have to really start putting in place. And I know that because I work as a consultant with different bars and restaurants and creating offer and menus and things like that. Then I always say there's another very, very interesting stats in which look at it is in a group of friends, the mindful drinker is very often the decision maker. Because if we were going to dinner, I actually will probably recommend the place and I will have a look at the menu before going. The same way that if I was vegan, you wouldn't take, and we were going for dinner, you wouldn't take me to a steakhouse, right? So it's exactly the same. So like the mindful drinker is the person who's going to look at the menu. So I will say, have a look when you are planning on like going for a drink or going to a restaurant, have a look at places, like have a look online at like their menu, reach out to them. And often if they don't have something, I'm the person that will take a bottle of sparkling wine. I take a bottle of Nutty and I'm like, you don't have anything on the menu, so can I open this?
That's a really good...
So I bring,
and they might charge you corkage or whatever.
But like, I'd rather have that than like actually not be able to enjoy my
I didn't really think about that. I didn't even think about that as an option. Because now like you've got introduced me to a whole bunch of like options. We've got loads at home. So I can potentially bring some with me.
Just take a bottle and reach out to them first. And often I will end up having a conversation with them. Like, you know, they taste it, they're like, this is delicious. And then they put it on the menu and everyone is like, you know, winning.
They might give you free corkage as
well. There you go. So I think that like, you know, being like, I always say as a mindful drinker, you have to be prepared. Like you have to like do a little bit of like that, because there's nothing more boring than being stuck in the place with like, you know, just drinking sparkling water or sugary soda. And I think that's really changing. Even pubs, you know, have now alcohol-free beer. I think alcohol-free beer is an amazing, they taste incredible. Like I think that the quality is remarkable, and like I will really be surprised like if someone could in the blind tasting could say that it's alcohol-free. And then
that's coming from, you know, someone of your authority in terms of like tasting and judging competitions.
Like, I actually have this IG series called What's Good and Not, so I taste everything, so you don't have you can go straight to what's gold, you know, what's delicious.
Great.
So I taste a lot of product and beers. I mean, there's some incredible beers, non-alcoholic beers. So that's always an option. And to be fair, most pubs now would have something. So I think it's always about asking. Unfortunately, and something that I'm really trying to like work on is also bars and restaurants, and often cocktail bars don't put it on the menu. So you think that there's no option, but actually have an option. So that's why I always say ask, because you will make a difference. And the more we ask, the more they would have to create a solid alcohol-free option. And then make sure that like sometimes you ask and they're like, oh no, actually we can make you something.
Gotcha. You know? And making sure that it's not too sugary and all the rest of it. You also have this thing called bookending. Now I imagine it's similar to exhaling and having a non-alcoholic drink and stripe. So
those are actually not bookending and zebra striping are actually terms that I didn't create, that are part of like what we see arising from the consumer insights, because it's also very interesting how we're really changing, and that's the mission, and my goal was to really show people that like we could celebrate and drink in a different way, to bring mindfulness into the glass, like I like to say. But we also see that younger generation are drinking less. Gen Z actually drink way less.
I've heard
like
this.
20% of Gen Z don't drink alcohol at all.
Really?
And 30% of Gen Z actually say that they enjoy the feeling of a workout more than the feeling of being tipsy.
Really?
Which is so interesting to see how it's shifting and changing.
To be fair, I probably fit in that. Not to say that I'm Gen Z or anything, but
I think that is self for us both. But I'm the same. I actually enjoy the feeling of a workout.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
so, and you have this thing, called what is it? Remove.
Yeah.
You tell us about the sort of strategies, because I think by now people are going to be sold. They're like, okay, I get it. I don't need to be sober to enjoy mindful drinking.
Yeah.
I'm probably one of the 74% who's looking, to reduce alcohol. What are the sort of what's your process, and what do people expect week on week after doing it?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm like, where do I start? I'm like, there's so many questions. The bookending, the replace with it. So, the benefit that you will experience by reducing alcohol, by either, and again, it will depend on like, if you started really high and you reduce it to the 14 unit of alcohol, that is the recommendation of NHS, you will experience some changes and some benefits.
Okay.
But we're talking about like reducing it even below
14,
the 14 units of alcohol. And so even from week one, you will begin to experience some positive changes in your life. First of all, better feeling more rested, because you are not disrupting your sleep as much. Better decision making, because obviously you're not having this like having your body to have to process this, which impact the decision. And that can be simply like what you want to eat. We know that like when we drink a bit too much alcohol, we tend to like navigate not always towards the best food choices or decisions. So all of that are sort of like the things that you can experience. Week two, you will start to experience more of. Week two, you will start to experience more of like your digestive system feeling a bit better, because obviously alcohol impact the lining of your stomach, and so you experience more of like that positive, like inside you feeling a bit lighter, a bit better. Week three, it's more of like,
because just to harbour on that point, because alcohol is 100% an irritant to the gut lining, and actually studies have shown that it increases the leakiness of your gut. Your gut should be leaky, but that permeability can be increased such that it generates a mild immune response, which generates inflammation. It can lead to symptoms that you're talking about.
And it's throughout also the balance of like the good and the bad bacteria in your gut health. So actually alcohol has a huge impact on your gut health. And so as you remove it, and there we're talking about like removing alcohol or reducing it, the best impact that you will see is by removing it. And even though I'm a huge believer in moderation, and I think that like people can find their balance, I also do recommend removing alcohol at first in order to change your drinking
So you should remove for how long? Like a week or two, or like?
So I teach a technique where a mindful drinking program, which is 6 weeks. Okay. And out of those 6 weeks, I recommend having 3 weeks of alcohol free.
Okay.
Because for many different reasons, to start to enjoy, it's a bit of like that reset button. Your body kind of like has the time to catch up, to reset. You really start feeling all those benefits that we just mentioned. But also because it gives you a little bit of space to become aware of your drinking habits, see yourself in social situation where you have to like learn a new way to socialize. If you're always drinking alcohol, to have to explore alcohol free, or to maybe socialize with your friend in a different way. So I think that like going on to that journey of the 6 weeks that I offer, you really by the end of it have found the balance that you want. And then so week 3, you start experiencing more of like your organs are like, at their like best potential. So like you have like your heart being like functioning better, your blood pressure, all of that. But I think for me, more than every week of like what's the physical benefits of like cutting out alcohol, I think and overall is people just feel better. And I think that like, as you reduce alcohol or as you cut it out for a little bit, then you just feel lighter, you feel like you have better clarity of mind, you feel like that you have more time, that like you are more energized, you feel like that you're improving your relationship because you have more meaningful, conversation and relationship with your friends, with your family. And sometimes that also means letting go of friendship, which is really hard and really challenging.
That is actually, and that's a very good point. Not to harbour on it too much, but I think the environment that you find yourself in can also be the people in said environment as well, and that's probably, I think, one of the biggest challenges when it comes for folks wanting to, reduce or even remove alcohol completely, because it does involve huge changes like that.
Absolutely.
In choosing a different social set, or even finding new friendships, which is a real challenge.
Absolutely. And I think for me that's really why I wanted to create this program, because I wanted for people to be able to find that tribe of like-minded people on the same journey that wanted to change their relationship with alcohol. Because for me, to drink well is to live well. I see that very often that's a missing piece of the puzzle in people's life. They're like, but I go to the gym and I eat well and I meditate sometime and I practice yoga and I try to do all the things. But if every weekend you drink too much, you're just not going to feel great. There's no secret on that. And I think that, to go back to that challenge of like sometime in friendship, people can be a bit like, oh, but like you've changed. It's like, I always talk about this beautiful image of like that drawing of a head and then say you change, and it's like all those flowers that have grown and you blossom. And I think that sometimes you have changed, but for the better. And sometimes that means letting go of friendship, or that means connecting with people in a different way. Like, as much as like bars are an incredible social environment and food and drinks bring people together, there's other things that you can do. And actually we see bars like offering more experiences. Either it can be like, I don't know, I was at Birdies recently and they had this like crazy like mini golf, and they actually do like tour when they take some people and they have drinks. So like there's loads of different things that like bars are realizing that they want to create an experience that is not just food and drinks. So I think that like that's really important. But to go back to the original question, the technique that I teach and that's part of like the program is that remove, replace, reduce. And for me, the remove is actually giving you a little bit of space to remove alcohol and to see how life is without it. And that can be a week, that can be how long you want. If we're looking at like more the scientific side of it, they do think that like 30 days is actually when you fully reset and you change the way that like you think about it and all of that. But I think that like taking some time off, whatever is manageable for you, and really having the space to become aware, to notice, to see when you want to drink, where you're like, oh, I really want to drink, oh, I really want to go out, or is this because I'm feeling stressed, or is this because I miss my friend? But like all of this, and that doesn't mean that like when you remove, you can't see your friend, but finding other things to do with them. Then you replace it and you enter this amazing world of alcohol-free options, and you
which
discover,
we're lucky to have now.
And I think that like it is fun. It's like a delicious safari journey. You go on, you try all this like alternative, you find what you like, you make sure that you have that in your fridge. Because for me, I have a glass at the end of the day pretty much every day, but 99% of the time is something that is alcohol-free, So you discover and you start replacing, because it's the same. I say to people, don't focus on reducing alcohol, focus on bringing alcohol-free option, because if you swap your glass of wine at the end of the day with an alcohol-free alternative, if you do that zebra striping when you go out, or you do that bookending, which is starting with an alcohol-free and finishing with an alcohol-free, then you will realize that at the end of the week, at the end of the month, you're drinking less alcohol. So it's about incorporating alcohol-free rather than restraining yourself. And then you reduce. And so that's the technique of you reduce the amount that you drink, but also even in the glass. Like if you look at my website, all my cocktails are only the one that are alcoholic are only 1 unit of alcohol. So if you were following the guide, you could have like 14 of my cocktails a week. It's like, but for me, I use less alcohol, better ingredients, more flavor in the glass. And so those are the techniques that you can really use in order to change your relationship with alcohol and to really have a positive impact and find the balance that works for you.
I want to talk about two things before we close, because I'm conscious I really want to start making some of these cocktails in front of us that we're going to showcase on YouTube. But the reduce element, I guess, is getting some pushback, particularly from the sobriety community, because, you know, for certainly, as we started this conversation, any alcohol for some people is just not the right way. And you can understand how passionate people get about this idea of reducing the poison instead of actually removing the poison, and to quote their words. And the other thing is the controversy around what non-alcoholic actually refers to, and actually how much alcohol there is in just regular foods that we wouldn't even realize. And that's something I didn't realize either. But, you know, what's sort of like your response to folks who are like, well, it's either sobriety or it's like, you know, you might as well just drink as much as you want?
Again, I think that everyone has a different journey. Everyone is dealing with their own, you know, triggers and coping mechanism. And so I never say to someone, this is how much you should drink. This is not my place to do any recommendation. I guide people on finding the balance that works for themselves. I also think it's a journey. Like, I haven't been drinking alcohol for a very long time now. You know, I went from not wanting to drink alcohol to being pregnant, to breastfeeding my twin boys, to being really, really busy with my, you know, young twin boys and my business. So like at the moment, I don't drink alcohol because I don't want to, or I don't feel the need, or I don't have the time or anything. So I think, but when I started, I was very much more on the moderation side of it. And I think that as it's an entry point, and that doesn't mean that sobriety is the goal, but I think that I wouldn't say to someone, well, what you're doing is pointless because you're still drinking alcohol. Like, I think that any reduction is positive. And I think that we should celebrate that and we should empower that. So that's, for me, really, really important. And I think that it's the same between, you know, like veganism and like being flexi. Like, I think that like reducing has a positive impact on our well-being, on the planet, on all of this. And it's the same with alcohol. I think that we shouldn't minimize reduction at all.
Yeah, it's a really good comparison, I would say. Veganism, it kind of smacks of that sort of vegan argument of like, you're either 100% vegan or you might as well just eat all the meat in the world. I think there's a really good middle ground that we should entertain, especially for people who, you know, still, like myself, who still enjoy the flavor of alcohol and, you know, certain occasions where I drink alcohol, but, you know, equally I could have this in place of it, and I feel a lot more clear-headed, and, you know, I can focus on my responsibilities.
And I think some people are put off by the idea of sobriety. Like I never, and also I don't identify with the word sober because I don't feel like that's my journey. And so for me, like, I never intend to not drink alcohol. Like, I never started this journey being like, I'm never going to drink alcohol again. But that's my own and unique journey, you know. And so, and if someone said to me at the beginning, okay, you're going to quit now and you will never drink alcohol for the next decade at least of your life, I probably would have said no. You know, and I think that it's an entry point, it's a journey, it changes, it varies, and I think for me that's really empowering. We should find our own unique balance, but for that we have to do the work. We have to show up and really be honest with ourselves, see our triggers, see when we use it to escape, to use that as a coping mechanism. If you're not honest on that journey, then obviously you won't find your balance. For sure.
And in terms of the vernacular around alcohol-free, so less than 0.5% is because there's a whole bunch of terminology out there if you're new to this world, and the comparisons between foods I found quite interesting. So maybe you can just whistle stop tourists around that.
Yeah, I mean, this is a challenging one, especially in the UK, and also knowing that like they are looking into the legislation at the moment, and things might change. So anywhere in the world, the 0.5 is considered non-alcoholic. So I wouldn't say
that's
like
0.5% ABV.
0.5% ABV, and ABV stands for alcohol by volume. So that means that there's 0.5 into what you drink. Knowing that, for example, if we take a spirit, a non-alcoholic spirit that says 0.5 on the bottle, depending on how much you use, that will also change in effect versus a 0.5 on the beer. So as you can see, we haven't even scratched the surface, and it's already complicated. So in the UK, at the moment, they consider that non-alcoholic anything that is up to 0.05, just to complicate everything else. But I will say this is changing. There's also a different, like depending on where the product is made. So if it's made outside of the UK, it can be up to 0.5. So scratch all of that, forget all of this. And if people say to me, yeah, but what about if it's a medical condition of someone who's not drinking alcohol because they can't actually imbibe alcohol at all? Yeah. And my answer is, if that's the case, that person is very well aware of what they can and what they can't. Yeah. Like this is like really rare and something that like they will know if they can't have this. Like I feel like any very, very specific reason of not drinking alcohol at all, you know what food and drinks you should avoid, right? So I will say anything that is 0.5 is safe to consume, is considered non-alcoholic in most countries. Yeah. And in this country, if it's not made in this country anyway. But knowing that like your body can process only 1 unit of alcohol per hour, and 1 unit of alcohol would be 1 measure of spirits.
That's 25 mils.
Would be 25 mils, or a very like small glass of wine would be like 1.5, 1.6. Also, I think people don't realize how big the serves are at home. You know, like they point, they're like, oh, I only had a glass of wine. I'm like, that's an extra large glass of wine, no judgment, but that's an extra large. So like knowing, like for example, a pint is 3 units. So for your body to be able to metabolize the alcohol, you will need to drink that pint in 3 hours. You know, so like slowing down, drinking water as much as you can is really, really important. But when it comes to 0.5, your body can process it and metabolize it very, very quickly. So that's safe, that's fine. And so some people that say, oh, but there's a little bit of alcohol. I'm always like, but that's traces of alcohol. And if you look at a ripe banana could have like 0.3, up sometimes even up to 0.5 if you like, you know, that banana that is ready for like the banana breads, that's for 0.5. A glass of like fresh oranges that you just squeeze would have again up to like 0.5.
Up to 0.5.
Yeah, they're like
in a glass.
Oranges that you give to your kids, you know, you're like, have this, like, and that's totally fine because like, you know, the sourdough that we're all making during lockdown, like again, that has like traces of alcohol and definitely would have something around 0.5. A can of Coke is 0.5.
That's crazy.
You know, like I think
the
that
fact that is
we don't, and I think that like we need to normalize that like there is alcohol. I mean, our digestive system produces like on average like 3 grams of like alcohol of ethanol every day. You know, so like I don't think that's something that we need to be scared of. And I will say 0.5 is alcohol free. You can drink it. This is safe. If you have a condition, then it's something that is different.
Sure. Yeah.
And then again, if it's for religious belief, then, you know, again, there's different alignment and on what you're comfortable. And again, it's your unique decision and choice that you make. But 0.5, your body metabolize it. This is totally safe. And if you don't want that, then you shouldn't have your brioche bun in your burger because, again, there's traces of alcohol. You shouldn't have sourdough or oranges and never eat a banana.
Yeah. I love that. That's complete news to me. Look, there's so much more, I think, within this mindful drinking movement that we could talk about. But I'm really conscious to start trying some of these drinks that we've got in front of us because there is a whole world of flavor and enjoyment to be had with this area that you know, I'm really privileged that you have brought this into my life, and I want to try and like pass it on by telling more and more people about it. You know, we had non-alcoholic wine and champagne at our wedding, and you know, you created all that for us. So like, I want to take other people on the journey because the benefits of clarity, the benefits of better gut health, the benefits of better sleep, better concentration, you know, they can be had with this small tweak to our lives without the sacrifice that most people think of when they think of sobriety. So I really appreciate your thoughts. And we're gonna start cocktail making.
I know we are. I'm excited. You can make some cocktails.
I know, I'll make some for sure. I'll make some.
But I think you're spot on that. I think that, you know, every time I share what I do, I introduce people to alcohol-free cocktail or mindful cocktails, as I call them. The reaction is always so positive. There's almost this like light bulb moment when they're like, oh, wow. And they really enjoy and they start becoming aware. And it has such a positive impact on people's life. And I think that for me, that's just so exciting. And And I think too often when we think of moderation, non-alcoholic, like the language is so negative around it that we feel like that it's about cutting out and we're going to miss out. You know, we are compromising our life and the experience that we will get. And again, I think that's false narrative, and there's an amazing way of celebrating life and finding the balance that works for ourselves. That's way better.
Epic. All right,
let's make drinks.
Let's start making some drinks. If you like that episode, you will love this episode with Jesse and Giuseppe. We talk about glucose, the uses of glucose, and glucose hacks that can flatten your glucose curve, and why that is important for health and longevity. You can check it out by clicking on the link right now.